Welcome to the first episode of Endo Warriors. I am so excited to be here. I am so thankful that you guys are here. This podcast has been an idea that I have had for a couple of years. So the fact that I am sitting here in my do-it-yourself studio, which is also my closet, is really exciting. And I know that you guys are gonna just love this podcast, and it's going to be full of authentic, real, honest conversations about endo, about chronic illness, and women's health in general. I am your host, Callie Greenberg, and fair warning, this is going to be a very real podcast where we talk all things messiness, and there might be some explicit language, and that's what I want, because I want this to be what we warriors actually go through. And I don't want to hold back. I don't want you guys to hold back. I want you guys to have a place where you feel seen and heard, just like I wanted that I didn't have. And this is why I created Endo Warriors. The podcast is going to be a mix of like therapy / educational, and I'm going to have all the people on that you would probably find in other podcasts. So medical professionals, researchers, people from endo foundations and organizations. I do truly want to have on women entrepreneurs who have started their own company within women's health. But really, I want to highlight and bring on as many endo warriors that I possibly can, because I think it is really important that we share our stories, because for so long, we all have been ignored, dismissed, not heard, and pretty much thought that we were fucking crazy. So I'm using this platform to connect all of us together. Women's health is simply not prioritized in the United States. I'm sure it isn't globally, but since I live in the United States, I'm going to be focusing on that. It is my personal opinion that doctors are taught to treat symptoms and not the individual. So instead of really listening to the patient that is in front of them, the person who is experiencing the symptoms and is telling them that they are in pain, something is not right, doctors, in my experience, have dismissed and normalized my suffering instead of investigating it. That is not to say that all doctors are doing this. There are great doctors out there. I was lucky to find some of them, but we are definitely lacking in believing women when they say they are in pain. And I think women's health needs to be a bigger priority globally and here, and we deserve more research and more funding. For the past 18 years, I have worked in healthcare as a med device sales rep, and my dad is a doctor, so I'm familiar with this industry. And the same industry that I have spent my entire career in is the same system that completely failed me. It's failed millions of women, and it continues to fail us. I have given some little teasers in, if you follow me on my Instagram page at Endo Warriors Podcast, and kind of given you guys little tidbits of my journey with endometriosis. I will go into that a little bit more on this episode. And then as episodes go on, you will get to know more and more about my journey. But it took 24 years for me to get a medical diagnosis. Okay. The average time for somebody to get medically diagnosed is between 7 and 10 years. And it took 24 years for me. I was 37 when I was finally diagnosed, and I was told I had stage 4 or 5 advanced endometriosis. And the disease had affected me mentally, emotionally, and physically my entire life. The worst thing, though, that this disease did was rob me of my ability to have biological children. I am 41 years old right now, and I had to have a total hysterectomy at 39. I went into menopause 7 days after my total hysterectomy. And because my endo is so advanced, I am unable to take hormonal replacement therapy drugs. So I have zero estrogen in my body. I do take progesterone at night, but estrogen is really important. And since I can't have that, the past couple of years have been incredibly difficult navigating all the things that come with menopause. And trust me, we will have episodes about that and hormones and all that jazz. But it is a bitch and it sucks. And I've been on the struggle bus. So we will definitely go more into that in further episodes. If I went through every single thing that my journey entailed, it would probably take us like 5 hours of me sitting here and telling you. So I'm going to give you kind of like the nutshell version of it. But I was 13 when I got my first period. And from that period on, experienced excruciating, debilitating cramps, like take my breath away, had to miss school type of cramps, not those achy, like, oh, it hurts, but I can get by. My flow was, no joke, looked like I murdered somebody in the toilet every time I went to the restroom. There was so much blood. It was like, it scared me because I was like, it is not normal that somebody is losing this much blood. I had to wear 2 Ultra Plus tampons, 2, and I would have to change them around every 20, 25 minutes. I was terrified that I was going to bleed through jeans or a skirt or the dress that I was wearing. I was going to stand up and there was going to be a pool of blood on the chair. And it kept me from like participating in social events or like going out with friends because that fear was so high that I didn't want to take the chance. And then summertime, don't get me started. Pool parties, would miss them, would not go. Like, are you kidding me? That is like social death in high school, is to be someplace at a pool and like, God forbid, like blood seeps out of you in the pool. Like, forget about it. Was not going to take that risk. So that gives you kind of an idea of just how heavy my flow was. I constantly felt fatigued. I had lower back pain. I felt bloated and I had headaches and just didn't feel well like all the time. And I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know that it was something more than it was than just having your period. And that's because the doctors told me it was normal. My first appointment with my OBGYN literally was her telling me that I should go home, put a heating pad, take some ibuprofen or Midol, rest. She can prescribe me some pain medication, but that what I'm experiencing is normal and women suffer with cramps on a monthly basis when they get their period. And the flow is different amongst everybody, but that there was nothing to be concerned about. So as a teenager, and even so today, when we go to the doctor, we trust in them. They are professionals. They went to school for this. So if they are telling me that I should not be concerned, then I don't know what to think, because in my head, I'm thinking, no, this isn't normal. But then I have a doctor telling me it is normal. So am I being crazy? Am I being overdramatic? Or is this doctor just not understanding? So I went to multiple doctors, primary care physicians, and not one doctor told me anything different. I was hospitalized when I was 14. I was hospitalized when I was 19. Both times I was told I had cysts on my ovaries, that it was hereditary. And yes, my mom did have cysts on her ovaries and that they would take care of themselves. And again, nothing to be concerned about. And they sent me home. I went on birth control, as I'm sure many of you listening were told to do as well, because supposedly birth control helps minimize the cramping every month. And for some, that might be true. For me, no. I experienced the same amount of cramping. My flow was just as bad. None of my symptoms were any better. But what I got better at was masking. And that meant that every day it was put a smile on your face, fake it till you make it. Because the thing with endometriosis is it is a disease and pain that happens on the inside, and it is not something you can physically see. So people have a difficult time understanding chronic illness when they can't physically see it on you. So, in college, when I went to the emergency room, I was hospitalized for 3 to 4 days, and they did all the scans, they did all the testing, and everything came back normal. The only thing that they could see was that I had an inflamed colon, and I had been sick like 2 weeks prior to that, and was put on an antibiotic, the Z-Pak, if you guys are familiar with that. And they jocked up my pain to an allergic reaction that I was having post viral. Again, you're the doctor. I believe you. It didn't matter that in my gut, I knew that something else was going on and that this wasn't right. But like when you are told over and over that it is, and you're being dismissed from multiple medical professionals, like you just start giving up and thinking, this is all in my head. I am fucking crazy. Something is wrong with me, because if they can't find anything in any of the tests, then clearly I am making this up. Well, spoiler alert, they were all fucking wrong. And they all suck. No. I mean, yes, they do, but you know, whatever. I went through my entire young teenage and adult life in misery and in pain, because not one doctor that I saw took enough time to truly listen to me. And even though my tests came back normal, my symptoms were not normal. And someone should have believed me and should have helped me and investigated it and found something out, because it just didn't make sense. The symptoms were clearly something else bigger. Something bigger was going on in my body. You can tell when I talk about it, I still get super frustrated, and it is just makes my blood boil. And anybody who has been through their endo journey and it's been years of late diagnosis, anybody who has a chronic illness where they feel like they go into their doctors and they are not heard, they are not seen, and they leave having more questions than when they first got to their doctor's appointment, knows exactly what I am talking about. It is so frustrating, because I truly believe if a man walked into their doctor's office or to an emergency room and had said that their balls were killing them and something wasn't right, they would have at least 5 medical professionals in that room, and that patient would leave within 20 minutes with a diagnosis. And for some, that is just my opinion, but I truly do believe that women are treated so differently when it comes to medicine. So take it or leave it. That's my opinion. I went off birth control when I was in my late 30s, mid 30s, let's say 35, 36. At the time I was trying to get pregnant. I was married. And when I went off the birth control, my symptoms just got worse and worse and worse. And through the research that I've done and the knowledge that I have now, I now know that endometriosis feeds off of estrogen. So when I got off birth control, no longer was my estrogen suppressed. So the endo just had a field day of food, basically, and just grew. And it was like 4 or 5 months in a row during my cycle that I would have to be physically helped up from the restroom and put into the bed. The slightest touch to my abdomen felt like somebody was inside just nonstop stabbing me. Standing up straight was one of the most difficult things. I would be at work and all of a sudden I would get like this massive shooting sharp pain in my lower abdomen, and like it would take my breath away, and I'd have to excuse myself and go to the restroom and be someplace where nobody could see me so that I could just cry. I was in so much pain, and I was at my job and like had to be professional, and I could only like take a couple minutes in the bathroom to myself and then go back to my job. So it was a lot of run into the bathroom, hunch over, cry, go back to work. Okay, go back to the bathroom. There were so many times where I would be walking out of the hospital, and that pain would come, and it was like I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to drive myself home. I ended up in the ER for like 3 to 4 months consecutive after I went off my birth control. And one of the times when I went into the ER, the nurse asked me on a scale from 1 to 10 how much pain I was in. She was like, 1 is the lowest, 10 is the highest. And I looked at her straight in the eye and I said, a 30. And she rolled her eyes, and I knew what she was thinking when she looked at me. She was thinking I was fucking crazy and there was no way that I could be in that much pain. And she had the audacity to look at me and tell me that I didn't understand the pain graph, that 10 is like the worst pain. And I then looked at her and said, I'm very aware of how the graph or how you measure pain because I work in healthcare. And I'm telling you that if 10 is the highest amount of pain a person could be in, I am at a 30. Like, you could look at me and tell, like, I had no color to my skin. I was shaking. I could barely talk. Any movement, I felt like I was going to throw up. And this nurse, after taking blood, running tests, and it all coming back normal, then told me I had 2 options. She could write a prescription for me for pain medication and send me home, or she could call the on-call OBGYN and they would likely take me into surgery and remove one of my ovaries. Those were my options. I said absolutely no to both of them. I didn't want to take pain meds, the high prescription pain meds, because A, I can't take them and work. And also I'm aware of how people become addicted to these pain pills. So I said no. And I remember saying at the time to my husband, like, let's get out of here. Like, this is ridiculous. The next month I ended up back in that same ER. And when I walked in, I was holding my stomach and I was kind of like hunched over. And the nurse who was triaging in the ER was like, oh, appendicitis. And quite honestly, I thought it was an appendicitis because it was on the left side. And I figured maybe that was going on, like, because I still didn't know at the time about endometriosis. So they admitted me and called the on-call doctor and we waited for him because they were going to roll me back and remove my appendix. And luckily, we suggested that I get a CT scan just to confirm. And when that CT scan came back, it showed it was not my appendicitis, but yet I had multiple massive cysts on my ovaries. And the doctor said that, asked me if I had had this before. I had. Every other ER visit, I had been told that I had cysts. And he said, they will take care of themselves in a couple of weeks. If you're still having pain, follow up with your OBGYN. They sent me home. And I really think it was like at this point that I was ready to just like give up. I was in so much pain and felt like shit all the time. And I called an OBGYN that I had seen prior years before, but she had left the clinic that I was going to. So I had stopped going to her, but I remembered her and I remembered her being really nice. And so I reached out to her. She got me in. I sat down with her for quite a while. I had my mom and my sister in there with me. I explained all of my symptoms, and she was the first doctor at 37 years old to look at me straight in the eyes and tell me that she believed me and that she thought it was possible that I had endometriosis. I will never forget that appointment because I didn't know what endo was. I had no idea what my future was about to turn into, but all I knew was it finally felt like everything that I had been experiencing was finally being taken seriously. And it felt good, actually, to have a diagnosis. I remember when she had mentioned endometriosis, she asked me if I knew what it was. And I kind of did like because in 2015, Lena Dunham, if you're not familiar with who she is the writer, producer, and she was an actress in the show Girls that was on HBO. But she was the first public figure that I knew that came out and wrote an article describing her symptoms and that she was diagnosed with endometriosis. And then in 2017, she followed it up with another article talking about how she voluntarily decided to get a total hysterectomy because she had had so many surgeries and the endo kept coming back and she was done with the pain and just like didn't want her lady parts anymore. So that was my baseline for what endo was. My OB ended up referring me to a fantastic endocrinologist here in Denver, Colorado, who also specialized in infertility, because at that time I did not know that endometriosis could affect a woman's fertility. So my next appointment ended up being with this endocrinologist and went at the time with my then husband. And we sat down with her and I had gone through all of the testing that she had me do. So I had my blood work taken, I had a ultrasound, I had a transvaginal ultrasound, MRI, CT, and that appointment changed my life. And it was a lot to take in. I remember her looking at me with these eyes of just not pity, but you could tell that like she felt really bad for me. And it was then that I was told that I had advanced 4 or 5 endometriosis and I had a 1 to 3% chance of conceiving naturally, and that I needed to have laparoscopic surgery to remove all of my endometriomas immediately. And as soon as I healed from that, I needed to go straight into IVF because that was likely my only chance at getting pregnant. And then the last part of that conversation was my endo was so advanced that she predicted my masses would return between 18 to 22 months after my surgery. Yeah. So I did have the surgery. And once I healed from the laparoscopic surgery, which ended up taking hours longer than they had anticipated, I had endometriomas on both my ovaries and multiple of them. I had endo inside and outside of my uterus, my fallopian tubes, my bowel, and I had a septum in my uterus. So the surgery took a while. She was really worried that she wasn't going to be able to save one of my ovaries, which was the left side, which is interesting because that's where I experienced most of my pain. She did end up saving it. And for the next 2.5 years, I did multiple back-to-back rounds of IVF. And it was hell. And they all failed, unfortunately. And she was pretty much right on when she had predicted when my endo was going to come back, because I would say it was about 18 to 20 months later, I started having pain again and went in, got an ultrasound, and my masses had returned, and they had returned with a vengeance and were so big that my ovaries were adhered to one another. And she told me that unfortunately my body was not going to be able to go through another egg retrieval and that I would need to have a total hysterectomy. That was one of the hardest appointments I've been to in all of my years through this journey, was being told that I was infertile and I was not going to be able to bear a child biologically. It still to this day is something that I grieve. I think that I will always grieve it. This disease changed my life, and it is something that still really frustrates me. I still hold a lot of anger with the healthcare system. I do a lot of, well, what ifs. If you're somebody who has experienced what I have, and the disease has robbed you as well of being able to carry a child, I go back and in my dark times think of if that first doctor would have just listened to me and would have done further tests or, consulted with another doctor. If this would have been diagnosed earlier, I would have been able to have the surgery to remove all the endo, fix my septum, and then I could have froze my eggs when I was much younger, and the quality could have been better. That is something I will never know. It doesn't help for me to do that in my brain, but it's something I can't help but to do. But it is, that's the realness. That's the messiness of this disease. And so many people don't know that, especially younger generations. So I think it's really important I feel an obligation as a woman, as somebody with endo, and somebody who has lived this experience, that it is my duty to do whatever I can to help somebody else not go through what I've gone through. It's been a really tough 2 years. I think that it's probably going to continue to be really tough. And in future episodes, I will talk about kind of what's happened in the last year. That has been very difficult, not just for me, but for our family to navigate. I won't go into that right now. You'll have to stick around. But that is why I wanted to create Endo Warriors. I want this to be a podcast and a platform for people to come and listen to and have that moment where they're sitting either in the car or at home and they're listening and they hear something I say or something a guest says or another person's endo journey story, and their shoulders kind of go down and they are like, oh my God, she fucking gets it. I never had one of those moments when I was in my journey, and that is what I want to provide for you guys. I really want you as the listeners to help me shape this podcast. And that means I want you to DM me and email me any questions that you have about my journey, about your journey. What would help you in any sort of way? What topics would you want me to talk about? What topics do you want me to go deeper into? What do you want me not to talk about? What wouldn't be helpful? I don't want to just be another podcast that is spewing out statistics. Yes, I will have medical professionals and researchers. I will have people from endo organizations and foundations on to talk about what they're doing and how we can get involved. But really, for me, what is so important is for this to be a podcast where you can message me if you want to come on and share your story. I am such a believer that the more we share, the more we learn. And the louder our voices are, then the less the system can ignore us and ignore this disease. When I was envisioning this podcast, just basically what I'm trying to do is create something that I didn't have that I was looking for. So I'll talk about hormones. I'm going to talk about supplements. I'm going to talk about diets. I'm going to make sure that the episodes are educational. They are personal. You will laugh. You will cry. It'll be funny. But it's going to be 100% authentic. And the conversations that I will be having will be real and as if you were a fly on the wall listening to me sit down and talk with my sister, my mom, or my best friends. Because that's just who I am. And I'm, happy that you guys are here to be on this journey. Like I said, follow the podcast page on Instagram at Endo Warriors Podcast. You can email me at ownmyendo.com or DM me on my socials. Please share this podcast with anybody you think would find it useful. Don't forget to hit follow, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. I think I'm going to do episodes every other week. I think that with this topic and whatnot, it can sometimes get really overwhelming. And so I think that doing every other week will kind of break it up and be able to kind of like mix between like super emotional, personal episode to one with like, a best friend to one with a medical professional, et cetera, et cetera. But again, message me because I want to know what you want. I want to know what you want to hear. I'm open to absolutely everything. And I'm excited to be on this journey. And I'm happy that you are on it with me. I promise you won't regret it. I think, that's a first good episode, and stay tuned for next time for an all new episode of Endo Warriors podcast. And until then, say hello, drop me an email, and have a fantastic night. Thanks, guys.